When talking about working with families in transition planning, remember that all of this is set in the legislation, and it started with PL 94-142, which said that for children with disabilities, that the families needed to be involved, and that includes things like prior consent, knowing that meetings are coming up, or prior notice, having consent to actually implement services, making sure that parents are involved in the meetings and participate in all of the decisions that are being made. When talking about family, it's really important to remember that family is going to be different for each of the students that you may be working with. Family may just be one parent. It may be extended family with grandparents and aunts and uncles who may be involved in that child's education. So just remember that in the context of this particular PowerPoint, when we're talking about family, we're not just talking about a traditional mother, father, child unit. We may be talking about a variety of different setups or configurations of adults within a family. With this in the next slide, it's really important to make sure that we are focusing on understanding families, because without understanding what a family structure is like and what the family dynamic is like, it's really hard to plan for transition services. And this is particularly true because we have to use outside agencies and we have to know what that particular student's living situation is going to be like after they leave school. If they don't have support at home, we need to know that as we're doing that transition planning. Or if they have an extended family where there are aunts and uncles and grandparents who are all very involved in that particular student's life, they may be able to provide assistance or some other resources that we won't have to go out and find an agency for. So this particular slide and the next one really do focus our efforts on taking a moment to figure out where a student fits within a family structure and what that family dynamic is like for that student. Beyond the family systems theory and the understanding of what the family dynamics is like, we also need to be considerate of cultural influences and understanding that it can be a dynamic and changing situation. We need to take not just the culture into consideration, but where the family is from, what their ethnicity is, what language they are speaking. All of those are really important influences. How much do the parents believe in assisting a child who has a disability? What are the cultural expectations for children who are leaving high school? Are they going to be supported as adults? So it's really important to understand where a student fits, not just within that family systems theory, but also within their own culture, because each group is going to have different expectations based on their own experiences, their own background, where they come from, and what their culture dictates. And trying to understand how a child fits within the culture of their own family, I think it's nice to think about a profile, if you will, of a student, and really to think about students on a continuum, and to think that, different children, whether they're maybe all from, Mexico, or another family, there's three families from Ireland, or four families who come from Japan. Each one of those groups, even though they may come from the same place or they may have the same cultural background, they may fit into different places within something like a traditional versus technology continuum. There may be one family who is more technologically based, where the other is more traditionally based. Or you look at the kind of nurturance and independence. You may have three families from Ireland, and two of those are very nurturing and not very far on that independence continuum, whereas the third family may say, okay, we kind of push all of our birds out of the nest, if you will, the second that they, finish school, no matter what their challenges may be. So don't just look at culture as this kind of this end all place. Think of it as kind of a combination of different components that each family is going to bring to the scenario when you're working with them and working with their family dynamics. One of the most important things to remember when you're working with families is that Not all families come to the table as willing participants, and that may be for a variety of reasons. It may be that families feel intimidated. They may feel intimidated by the school system because they don't have an education or they didn't, finish school. It may be because they are not from this country, they don't speak the language, or they don't understand the process. They may resent the school because they may see the school as the cause or the reason behind the child's disability. There's a lot of reasons why you're going to find resistant parents, but it's also important to remember that these are barriers that can be overcome. So just keep in mind those components and try to kind of figure out what the hurdles are going to be and then work through them through collaboration and a lot of the skills that we talked about very early on in the semester with how we go about working with folks and how we go about meeting resistance and conquering that. The more information you can provide parents, the better off your relationship is going to be. In addition, it's going to make your meetings go much more smoothly because they have all the information and can come into the meeting feeling prepared and confident. So provide everything from procedural information, what's going to happen at the meeting, what are the rights of the parents, provide them with accurate testing information, or if you're working with other agencies, can you provide information sheets about that, or we'll talk in a little bit about the age of consent, making sure you have all that documentation in front of you. Things that have to do with disabilities, or do you have info sheets on specific disabilities or what that disability looks like or manifests into once that child then becomes an adult. And really, language does matter. And by saying language matters, I mean the type of language you're using, whether you're using technical language or you're using jargon, or you are kind of breaking things down. In special education, there are a ton of acronyms. And sometimes it's easy to kind of get caught up in that. So it's really important to make sure that you're breaking those down for parents so that you're ensuring that they have an understanding of what you're talking about and that everyone is on the same page. The next couple of slides have to do with how to collaborate, tips for collaboration, and I'll just kind of speak to a couple of these and let you kind of read the rest on your own. But the one that I want to focus on this particular slide is number one, which is examining one's own values. I think it's really important to think about what you're bringing to a meeting. In my experience, I've been a behavior specialist, and I was a behavior specialist for a very long time. And one of the things that I always talked to people about was who owns this problem. So I would come into a meeting and have teachers or counselors or whoever it was telling me that this child was doing X, Y, or Z. And then as I would listen, I would start to wonder, well, who really owns this problem? Is this really a child, a student-owned problem? Or is this a teacher-owned problem? Is it the teacher who's really having the problem with this behavior? Because the behavior really isn't a problem in any other context. So I encourage you to do the same thing when you're collaborating with families, to think about who owns the problem. Even though you may not agree with how a parent wants to deal with their child in transition services, or you may not see the same future for a child that that parent might see, try to think about who owns the problem. Is that your problem in terms of you're just not accepting the fact that this isn't going the way you want it to go, or that you disagree? Look at the big picture and kind of take a step back and think about your own feelings in the meeting and with engaging the parent. And are you looking at it from a teacher's perspective, or are you kind of trying to feel what that parent might be feeling as well? The remainder of this PowerPoint is pretty straightforward. You can read from the slides, and I don't feel that me saying anything is going to really add anything more to the information that's presented. So I'll let you kind of go through those at your own pace. But there is some talk about conflict, the results of conflict, how to work through the resistance, and then just really how to get parents involved in the transition process. I think it's really important to go back to everything that we've talked about with collaboration, thinking about the manifestation of each of the disabilities as well as the multitude of components that are involved in transition planning, and you can imagine how overwhelming this might be for a parent. So take a look at the rest of the PowerPoint. And like I said, I think most of it is very straightforward, and hopefully you'll find that information helpful and useful.